wants to demonstrate that the slave boy is able to learn mathematics on his own. He does not need to be taught. That's the point. So the question is, he shows this and he concludes that look, this guy knows mathematics, he is able to learn mathematics on his own without my teaching it. How could he do it? The knowledge is intrinsic, it is already inside. The job of a philosopher is that of a midwife, just to bring out that knowledge, which is already inside. So how is that knowledge already inside? Because he has a soul. And the soul learned that knowledge in its past lives. This is what Plato says. And why do you use mathematics for it? Not something else? Because of the belief that mathematics involves eternal truths. The soul was believed to be immortal, and eternal truths most readily arouse the soul by the principle of sympathetic magic that like arouses like. So soul is immortal, mathematics is eternal, soul is also eternal, so like arouses like. Therefore mathematics is what interests the soul, it arouses the soul. That was the belief. Okay, that's what Plato said. This is there in Meno, please go and check it out. It's a very famous story, but perhaps nobody explained the story to you like this. Question now is, what is that notion of the soul? That's the point at which the conflict begins. Now this notion of the soul in early Christianity was very simple. And this is explicitly, this is not, you don't find it very easily. You won't find it in secondary sources. Therefore, I have given you the primary source, Origen of Alexandria, and its deep principles. You can get it, you can download it today from the internet, it's available. And you can find the corresponding passages on my website. So it was identical notion that was there in Christianity. And in fact, they were so similar, the beliefs of Christians and philosophers, so-called pagans or Egyptians, that some people explained it as the devil's parody, and those details will come out in my forthcoming book. So that was the case with early Christianity, similar notion of soul. But then after the Nicene Council, when church and state got together, the church wanted some means to secure its power. Normally people have an army and so on, the church could not have that, so it needed a different kind of weapon. And that weapon, because it could not go for hard power, it went for soft power. That's the time at which soft power was invented. And it was invented by changing the Christian doctrine. The doctrine was refashioned into a weapon to enable the priest to rule. That's the thesis that I have put forward several years ago. And therefore, the church cursed the earlier notion of the soul. It did not want to believe in the earlier notion of the soul because the earlier notion of the soul implied equity for everyone. Now, equity was not acceptable. There had to be some special privileges available for people who followed that and so on. So this is discussed in the chapter on the curse on cyclic time at great length in my book, 11 Pictures of Time. So I have a copy of the book somewhere. I can show it to you. I can show you a picture right now. And if somebody is interested, I can distribute that chapter and I can distribute the details of Origen if you want to go into depth. Point is just this, that the notion of soul was changed. When it was changed, this sparked up a religious war. Why? Because the church would not tolerate dissent, it would not tolerate difference of opinion, and the philosophers would not change their beliefs about the soul. So this was the origin of that religious war, and it was a very horrible religious war, because you know what happened in the Roman Empire, that every last pagan temple was smashed. Not a single one left standing. You can see those remains today in Alexandria, for example. They were magnificent temples. Every last one of them was smashed. Now you think of it. In India, one masjid was broken. It has led to so much trouble for the last 20 years. Because it's a very big thing to do. If you break down one temple or something like that. And this, every temple in the Roman Empire was destroyed. All the books of the philosophers were burnt. There were all these fiats that were issued by Roman emperors, burn this book, burn Porphyry's book, burn that book, and so on. And the great library of Alexandria was also burnt at this point of time. And of course, Theon was the last librarian of the great library of Alexandria, and as I mentioned, Hypatia was his daughter. So the question is, this was the situation at the beginning of the 5th century. And Hypatia was the most prominent mathematician, philosopher of that time after Theon. So what could she have done? So the basic idea of mathesis, the belief is that knowledge is virtue. This is a very interesting belief in the context of decolonizing our universities. The idea is that people do wrong things because they don't know. If somebody writes something wrong, okay, mathematics not connected with religious belief, it is something different, it is because they don't know. So what do you have to do? You have to remove that ignorance. And if you remove that ignorance, then the person will automatically become good. People don't do bad things knowingly, that's the idea. You will not hurt yourself knowingly. You do something all the time because you think it is something good for you. So that's the theory, that's the belief. And so what would you do if you find people doing bad things? You would remove their ignorance. Okay, this is what Hypatia would have done, and this is what anybody would do. So natural thing would be to write a book to dispel ignorance. I also write books. So I don't write books or KPI or anything like that. It's obviously because I want to communicate something. So that is the issue, that there is something compelling which you want to communicate, and therefore you write. And because it takes a lot of effort. And if you examine the elements, it is written with this viewpoint. I won't go into that detail because it will take us a lot of time, but it would be there in my forthcoming book that you can interpret the elements very nicely. I'll just give you one simple example. The first proposition in the elements. Why is it the first proposition? First proposition is always significant. It's a fish figure. So this is a book addressed to Christians. Why? Because the fish figure was the secret figure for them. Okay, this is the explanation that the Greek word for it is ichthys, and this is what it means. And so they used to have this secret symbol of greeting each other because it also makes out the cross. And therefore also at this point of time, because this was happening, it was natural for Proclus to comment on what she wrote. And he explained that you do this, you learn mathematics, it leads to the blessed life. You don't do it for its practical value. That's what Proclus says. We do it for its practical value. That's a different problem. But that was his point of view. So that's the fish figure, and if you join the north and south, you will get a cross. So you have to turn your head a bit like this to see that fish figure. Right? It's the fish, that's the mouth, that's the tail of the fish. You have to imagine it a bit, but that's how it used to be made. That was the secret sign, because it makes out the cross. And, well, this is my image of Hypatia. Well, I haven't drawn it. Somebody called James Kremer has drawn it. But I suggested to him, so you can see the background of the Great Library of Alexandria burning, and you can see that she is a very athletic person and that she is also very learned. She has those books in her hand, and as you can see, the color of her skin, I don't have to mention. Of course, if you ask me what evidence I have, I will say that's the default. What evidence you have that her color was something. So that's the picture. I think that if you give one picture, then the counter argument to that is another picture. So this is, I'm sure, D. Yuan is sitting here, I'm sure he is going to come up with something really fantastic based on this. Okay. So now we know what happened after that. Hypatia was raped and she was brutally killed in a church by a person who was later called a saint, Saint Cyril, whose uncle Theophilus had burnt down the Library of Alexandria. Saint Theophilus. And, well, it's not really a spelling mistake, Wikipedia, because it's such a vulgar photo, such a vulgar picture which is put there. It's trying to indirectly justify. That's why I have not reproduced the photo. Okay, if you like, you can go and take a look at it. It is such a vulgar photo because it is such a horrible thing in intellectual history. And this chap is trying to put a picture of somebody who is semi-naked and leaning there lasciviously, and so that to justify what happened. So I think that this is why I call it Wikipedia. You should not believe, because these things become very dangerously propagandist. Point is, she was killed. Proclus was declared a heretic. And being a heretic carried the death penalty. All schools of philosophy were shut down in the Roman Empire in 529. And history will tell you, okay, there were some 7 fellows. No, for 7 people you don't pass a law. 7 people you take care of them separately. Right? A big Roman Empire does not need to pass a new law to take care of some 7 philosophers. It's obviously something very widespread. which could not be controlled despite all that, despite smashing the temples, despite killing people, despite declaring them heretics, you could still not stop it. And therefore this was done, and therefore that curse was placed, and so on, and that led to the dark age of Christianity. I have to say Christendom because the situation in other parts of the world was quite different. But you cannot just speak of the dark age, because what was dark age somewhere was golden age somewhere else. You have to specify what you're talking about. And this catalyzed the golden ages of Persia and Islam, this kind of belief in knowledge as virtue. You still find it in the Sufi tradition very much. And particularly it led to the Bayat al-Hikmah, which is the house of wisdom in Baghdad. This pursuit of wisdom, I mean, it's knowledge in a different sense, not knowledge in the sense we use it today, so it means wisdom really. And a point I would just like to take a minute to talk about, that look at the difference of this model from that of Western universities. So Western universities taught for enslavement, here you have education for freedom. So if we want to learn anything from history, we want to bring back that golden age, what must we do? We should follow this model, and we should not create more slaves, we should create more free people. Because that is what leads to a real golden age. So our education should be done with this model in mind, which is a so much better model than the other. So this is just a point which I thought I should mention, especially since the minister is sitting here. So, well, let me come back to my thing, that the golden age of Islam led to the spread of books and libraries throughout the Islamic world. And that included the Khilafat of Qurtuba, and well, it spontaneously disintegrated for whatever reasons, sometime in the 11th century. And naturally, if it was so rich and it disintegrated, it became a target. And this led to the Crusades, which basically consisted of multinational forces under a religious banner. I think that's how you have to look at the Crusades. And that's why I called Toledo as part of the Crusades, because its library came under Christian control in 1085. Official date for the Crusades given by Western historians is 5 years later. But nobody launches such a big thing without having some prototypes. So now the point is, you have this library. This library has been captured. Now the policy of the church since the 4th century has been to burn all these books because they are heretical books. So what does the church do with this? So those books were not burned. That's the turning point in European history. But those books were not turned, they were mass translated into Latin starting from 1125. And that's what led to the flow of books in Europe, and then the demand for paper and so on and so forth. Question is, why was this change of policy instituted? You have a policy which is going on for 600 years. Why this sudden change? What happened? What was the compulsion? What was necessary for it? So I think what we have to realize is that all the crusades after the first ended in military defeat. Of course, this was military defeat. It was not a defeat for the church. Church made money both ways. People won or lost, made money. It was a very simple process. When people went for the war, they had to mortgage their stuff to raise money for the war. So they mortgaged either their land or their belongings, and so if they died, the church confiscated that. If they returned victorious, church got 25% of the loot. So whether they won or lost, church made money. And its political influence kept on increasing. It became so powerful at that time. So even if you see the descriptions much later, the kings were nothing compared to the cardinals and popes. Anyway, the point is that there was this military defeat, and therefore there was a need for knowledge, either for a military victory or to persuade people to change, to convert. And therefore the church wanted those books, but it had to justify it. You have a policy was, so you believe was so long that Euclid exists, you want to change, you have to justify it. So that, of course, it was at a particular point of time where there was enormous religious hysteria, and that justification was that these books are coming from a theologically correct source. Not only a theologically correct source, the books were also manipulated in order to make the content theologically correct. That had to be done. And so how to make the source correct, that was a very simple process, that whatever knowledge is there in these Arabic books, it's all coming from the Greeks. And why Greeks? Because the early Greeks, there was no possibility of conflict with the church. They preceded the church. So they were just at different points of time. Later Greeks like Hypatia, Proclu and so on, there was a conflict. But early Greeks, there was no conflict, so Eusebius had already declared that they are friendly, they are friends. So attribute that, and whatever happened later, that's to be attributed to Europe. It's a simple process. But you see what happened, it did two things. When you attribute it to Greeks, it belittles all those Arabs as people who just copied. They didn't have brains, they could not do any creative thinking, they just copied. That's the kind of history that was written. And it also belittled the Egyptians, because they said that they could not have done it. And this last part was completed by day-to-day racist historians, which is described by Martin Bernal in his Black Athena, The Fabrication of Ancient Greece. His thesis is that when the slave trade started, the historians started rewriting history in order to show that the Africans were incapable. And this was done, and it continues to be done almost to this day. So the point is, you don't find an author, you just invent one, there is no problem. So this happened with Euclid, it also happened with Ptolemy. And okay, so I think I mentioned that, what happened to all later knowledge. But the issue is, this is how, through this process of making history geologically correct, all science became Western in quality. That's why you get that in present day encyclopedias and books, and that is why this is something that is challenged. The other part, that's a little more difficult to understand, and I'm not going to explain it very much, I'll just mention it, which is that there had to be some way of converting Muslims, because they did not accept the scripture, they could not be converted by force, crusade trade. Europe was converted by force. So Aquinas told missionaries to appeal to reason. Sorry, there is a typing error there. So he told missionaries to appeal to reason. Why reason? Because there was the Aqli Kalam. So that was Islamic rational theology, which was very prominent, which played a very prominent role in the building of the Bayt al-Hikmah. And it was very strong also in Cordoba. Ibn Rushd, Averroes, you have heard of. So this was very strong. So for Jews, you can use the Old Testament, but for them, what are you going to do? They're not going to accept the scripture, you have to use reason. So how to use reason? How can the church use reason? Church was never talked about reason earlier. So there's some justification has to be invented. So the doctrine itself was changed. You had what is called Christian rational theology. That's what Aquinas and the schoolmen did. And now once you have that, then you have to link it. And so the myth of Euclid helped the church to claim ownership of it. So look, this is our man who did it. So reason is ours, it doesn't belong to them. It's not that we took from Islamic rational theology, but we took from Euclid. Okay, that's the logic. And that logic is still used till recently. Pope Benedict made this remarks in 2005. Now, I wrote a long article about that. It is available on the internet, and the link is hidden. It's at Z Communications, but you can find the link from me, or you can see it. It was also published. So I have explained exactly what his reasoning was. The point is to characterize Muslims as unreasonable. This is exactly what he is trying to do. And that's a long thing, I won't go into that, but the point is the ownership of reason is important, and Euclid is an important link in that. Okay, mathematics too had to be interpreted, because mathematics related to mathesis. Mathesis was a doctrine contrary to the church belief. So it was dealing from mathesis. It's got nothing to do with soul. It's all about reason, because that was what was required. That was the need for the church at that point of time. So reason about proof. How do you prove to the other guy that he is wrong? So you have to have some means of proof which is universal. And reason was used for that purpose, and it was therefore mathematics itself. Mathematics was then used to teach reason, geometry was used to teach reasoning. And so it was interpreted as concerned only with reason, with teaching reasoning, a certain method of reasoning, which was what was needed at that point. So the last point I would like to make, maybe I have one or two more left, almost two, I'm sorry I've taken too long. That attributing, if you don't know anything about Euclid, that facilitates the reinterpretation. If you know Hypatia, Paklu, you know what they're thinking. If you say, oh, to this unknown guy, you don't know anything about him except this passage, and that gives you his philosophy in a nutshell. Right? So, this is a simple trick which the church has often performed. You just plant something in the scriptures. See, in India, when the Portuguese came, they found the Indian Aramaic Bible so different from their own Bible that they burnt all copies of it in 1519. So you can understand what kind of transformation was done. Well, Newton worked a lot on that, and his work is still suppressed. So the passage was planted, and that is used as evidence for the intentions of this unknown Euclid. Well, if a known person's intentions are hard to find, unknown person's intentions are easy. Okay, so there was a belief in mathematics, it was eternal truth which persisted, and this is still used today. I think I'll skip that. Last point here is this: what was done today. What we do today is based on what Russell and Hilbert did. They reinterpreted the elements. And the interesting thing here is that what is the myth of the elements? That it gave you a special kind of proof, deductive proof. What was special about this deductive proof? It was a metaphysical means of proof. It did not allow somehow empirical means to be used. That was the story, that was the myth. But that myth does not fit the facts. Every manuscript of the element uses empirical proofs in an essential way. That fish figure that I showed you, that already uses empirical means, because you do not know that those two things will intersect. You see it intersect, but that's an empirical proof. You cannot mathematically prove that it intersects starting from the axis. First theorem requires that, fourth theorem requires that. And so what Russell did was that, look, the myth is important, facts are not important. So he dismissed the proof of the fourth theorem, calling it a tissue of nonsense. And they made math completely metaphysical. And then it is 100% metaphysical. Now I will again discriminate. What I am talking about is what is taught at the university level. It is not your everyday normal commercial math. What is taught in the university is formal math that has to be completely metaphysical, and the problem is that that metaphysics retains a religious bias. I've written on that quite a bit. I talked about it, and the idea still dominates math teaching today. That math is about proof. How should proof be given? Proof should be given by using a particular process, a particular kind of metaphysics. That metaphysics is biased. It's religiously biased, and therefore we should eliminate at least that religious bias. And I explain this in detail in my decolonization talk. You can look up the paper, you can look up the video also. I won't go into it now unless people want to get into the questions. The problem is that if I try to change, that is going to, who's going to judge it? It's got to be judged by some experts, and those experts may be Western indoctrinated, because they learn math in a different way. So how do you bring about a change? It's like trying to change the textbook. Hitting your head against the wall, because the person says, I don't care about evidence. I don't have evidence, I still do. So this is the kind of problem that occurs. And so we need a strategy to implement the teaching of this decolonized math. We have an agenda, we have a program, and we need to put it into action. The other thing is that we also need to clean up history and philosophy. So if you have a case of Euclid, I think this shows how you can build up stories around no evidence. You can go on creating some little evidence here, some evidence there, and go on. You can build it out of nothing. And it can be maintained for centuries. So the third part is that false history was what was used to misguide and overpower people. If we have these institutions today, we have them because of that false history. So we need to do that, and I think Euclid is just one instance, the probable tip of the iceberg, and there are lots of things which need to be corrected, and if you correct the history and philosophy, science will also change side by side. And well, so I think that this is a task which needs to be done, that all history and philosophy of science has to be critically re-examined from a non-Western perspective. And I will just leave you with this thought, last thought, that history is not about the past, history is about the future. Okay? So, thank you.
Thank you.
That was quite long. Yes. As I was listening to you, I was trying to understand something that was happening not very long ago. This is a question of the burden of proof. How can you prove that communism is still in existence in this country? You line up some swords and bottles, call the bottles Molotov cocktail. One thing I also learned about the difference between an academic and a politician. In the academia, your loyalty is to prove. You have to prove, you have to bring up evidence. In politics, it's the reverse. You prove your loyalty. Brothers and sisters, we have about half an hour for Q&A, so can I have the first question? It was a very enlightening speech given by Raju. Yes, can I have that? If you can state your name.
I'm Dr. Lok Chong Ho from the School of Humanities. Thank you, Dato. Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, Prof. Raju. I would like to address several questions to Prof. Raju, of course, but they are quite disconcerted and disorganized. But I'll try to do it as fast as I can. Now, the earlier assertion you made about all sciences being the work of the West, or the impression that's given by Western science is that all science came from the West. And I think, I do not know if this premise is very, very accurate. I'm learning. I'm not a scientist. I'm from the arts. Now, but you did also mention, maybe there's some degree of inconsistency there. You mentioned Joseph Needham, who had 15 volumes on science in the Far East. Actually, those volumes can be found in our library. Only 7 volumes left. Don't know what happened to the other 6 ones. Anyway, Joseph Needham worked on it, science from the Far East, as early as the 1910s and 1920s. And that wasn't even a late work. It's a very early 20th century work, which means that even by the 20th century, a lot of Western historians of science, or historians who want to look into scientific development, have gone all over the world. There is also, if you go to our library, there are also works on Indian science, and also works on the discovery of optics in Baghdad. They come from historians who have worked on the development of science all over the world. It is true that there are certain quarters who want to give the impression that science is very much essentially a Western development. That is true. That's the impression that a lot of people want to give. But at the same time, if you go hard enough and look into different publications that have been done from the early 20th century onwards, you will find that a lot has also been written about developments of science and technologies from other areas other than in Europe. And the famous center that we have, the East-West Center in Hawaii, for instance, has important departments studying the development of science from non-Western centers. And actually, when you link Joseph Needham to his remark on deduction, actually, I think what Needham was trying to ask is, how come the Industrial Revolution did not happen in this place if it has developed science so well? The question that has been asked all over the world, in terms of development of sciences in other parts of the world, the question that has always been asked is, why did not the Industrial Revolution take place there? or why did not the Enlightenment take place there? Now, I'm not trying to develop a position. I'm just asking questions, voids which you may help me to fill. The other question which I would like to address, Prof. Raju, is this. The question of belief. You have said that something that has been accepted for thousands of years can still be disbelieved. That is, of course, a plain truth. The Greeks believed, for instance, that the earth was flat. For hundreds of years they believed that. The Greeks believed, for instance, that the sun and all the other planets revolve around the earth until they were proven wrong much later when the heliocentric model was eventually accepted. Now, even today, I think a lot of more deep-thinking scientists would claim that many scientific theories that have been accepted today need not necessarily be true and can be open to falsification. In fact, as early as the 1930s or 40s, Popper had already came up with his conjectures and falsification, in which he says that scientific theories may not be verified, but can be falsified. The fact that he opens the possibility for falsification means that theories or whatever assertions that are being made in science today can be open to falsification. They are not saying that it's definitely true. They can be falsified, but in the meantime, before they are being falsified, if we can use them, we use them. So why are certain theories still being used, even though they are open to falsification, and even though we know that there are weaknesses in them? Because they can be used. They are useful. Usefulness have today become the important catchword rather than the belief that they are dogmatic truths that can never be falsified. I don't think so. It's usefulness that counts. And regarding the whether or not Euclid really exists, I do not. It's an important question to the philosopher, to the historian of science. I have no doubt about that. But again, the question of usefulness. I think it is more important to use rather than trace back whether this theorem was invented by Euclid or by somebody else. For instance, how many people know who invented microchips? How many people know who invented the handphone or the computer? I don't think many of us know, but they are useful. We use them. I have other questions, but I can't be selfish. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you for stopping. But sir, thank you so much for the question. That's right. You want to?
Yes, since it's such a long question, I better answer it. So let me start with this claim that you made. Well, Needham did something. Therefore, there are some people in the West who are looking at the possibility that science did not come from the West. That's not correct. The particular quote that I gave from Needham showed, yes, he talks about a few things here and there, Pascal's triangle and so on. But he took Euclid as the model. He assumed that that's the right way to do mathematics. And the question that he then asked, and I'll come to your Industrial Revolution shortly, the question that he then asked was, why didn't the Chinese do mathematics like this? It's like, what is that film, My Fair Lady? Why can't a woman be more like a man? It is something like that, I may be caricaturing Needham, but that is what he does. Let's look at the serious part of it. As you say, you are looking at the question of usefulness. So I have here a book which says calculus started in India, not in Europe, not with Newton. What's its usefulness today? We teach calculus in a different way. That is what I have been doing here for the last 6 months. Now, that is something useful in many ways, that it makes mathematics easy, it allows people to work on harder problems and so on. It allows calculus to be taught to non-math students, as I have demonstrated. But what about its acceptance? The question that is asked is, why does it not imitate Euclid? That's the question that historians keep asking today. Why does it not give proof? That's what they say. There were no proofs. They're wrong. But the model, the standard they have got is there. And unless you break down that standard by saying it is totally imaginary, it's not that Euclid did not exist or somebody did it earlier. It is that it is based on the needs of the church. It is not based on my needs. It is useful to them. It's not useful to me. I don't need to do proofs of that kind. They lead me nowhere. But that's the way everybody is doing mathematics today. So I think that this is what is being challenged. It's not merely, when I say Euclid does not exist, the point is he was concocted. He was concocted by somebody for a certain purpose. And that purpose does not suit me today. But who is going to decide that? What is useful, what is not useful? I ask, you are doing something, well, you show me how it has helped the people around you. That's not the way it is judged. Say it is judged by which journal have you published in, which Western journal have you published in, and who has patted you on the back from the West. That's how it is judged, not by the usefulness to the society around you. So I think that when we are talking about this issue, we need to be clear that what was done in the 20th century was just a little bit. What we are now saying is something which is, the balance has shifted just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit to make the thesis a little more credible that science actually originated in the West. Alright, now what we are talking about is something very different. And incidentally, this thesis, first talk I gave was in the East West Center at Hawaii, where one of the, Arindam Chakravarti is there, is a good friend of mine. Now, but still, they are not willing to take into account. Today, supposing I say, let us start doing economics from an Islamic perspective. Let's start doing it from a Buddhist perspective. East West Center Hawaii is not going to take that up so easily because it's ultimately under the American government. So you cannot challenge those fundamental premises so easily. Anyway, there are many more fundamental questions that are being raised when you say the Greeks had a geocentric theory. Which Greeks? According to me, the Greeks did not know how to add and multiply. They had no astronomical theory. The Romans thought there are two suns, that's what Pliny writes. Not 3, 2. At most 2. So where is the evidence that the Greeks had any geocentric model at all? The evidence comes from the Almagest. And the Almagest, as the name suggests, is an Arabic book. And where did that astronomy come from? And how could the Greeks have done any astronomy? So anyway, I think that there are a whole lot of things that are being done which go far beyond what Needham thought of. So the mere fact that somebody does something is not enough. A lot more needs to be done, and it needs to be incorporated into a practice. What we are talking about is not merely that this was done earlier, but that this is a good way to do it still. That calculus was invented in India, but that's a useful way of doing it. That's how we still calculate things. That's how we still calculate. If I want to send a spacecraft to the moon, I will still do the numerical study of differential equations. I am not going to prove a theorem. That's not going to help. So these are issues which need to be taken in. Your other point was that what Popper's thesis that a theory may be falsified, but it can still continue to be useful. Yes, it's possible. The Newtonian theory is falsified in a certain way. You can still continue to use it under certain circumstances, and you may want to give it up under certain other circumstances. But I didn't quite get the point of that. Maybe we can discuss this issue of falsification. I did discuss it with Popper, and he agreed that there are serious issues with this idea of falsification. He agreed that there was a problem, and he said he would reply, but unfortunately he died before he could do that. So I think I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Industrial Revolution.
Industrial Revolution. Why did the Industrial Revolution not take place? Why did the Enlightenment not take place elsewhere? Well, maybe people are already enlightened elsewhere. So, the issue of Industrial Revolution, you see, this is a particular way of thinking, a mechanistic way of thinking, which occurred in Europe. And this is not a question which can really be answered by examining what happened elsewhere. Why did colonization, why did India and China not go around and build huge colonies? It didn't happen. And the Industrial Revolution, if you see, was triggered off by the collection of knowledge from all these sources, by the collection of capital from all these sources, which was an enormous amount, by the use of slave labor in the United States and so on, well, in the Americas. So I think that it is not a very clear connection, what exactly happened. I mean, maybe that is the question you're asking, but so what? We are talking about something different. There was a falsification of history. So he wants to ask and he wants to answer, let him go ahead. We are talking about a large-scale falsification of history which needs to be undone. And that question Nina did not ask, he did not address.
Okay. Can we have the next question, please? Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm a PhD student at USM University. We know that we had a great civilization. We, I mean, as East or Muslims. But I think when we talk about Euclid or attacking him is not existed or not, I think we're still standing in the position of defense. So my question, what shall we do as a new generation of researchers to change the situation and shift the paradigm to get our heritage? I mean, is it benefit until now to still attacking them or in the position of defense that X are right or wrong, or put a new plan to change the situation? So what shall we do exactly to shift the paradigm? Thank you.
The paradigm that you had from Euclid was the paradigm of proof. That's what Euclid is a symbol of. But this paradigm of proving is, it does not have the same meaning for proper. So, if you look at the Mathesis paradigm of proof, it's a completely different idea. The idea is to take your mind inside. The idea is not to prove something for the other person, but to start thinking about something in such detail that you get detached from the external world. So it's a completely different notion of proof, and therefore Propler will say that proof will vary according to the kinds of being. So at the beginning of the elements you can have one notion of proof, at the end of the elements you can have another notion of proof. That is not possible with the kind of Euclidean paradigm or the crusading paradigm or the post-crusading theological paradigm of proof. So the whole idea is that if you start looking at this thing in its entirety, then this paradigm has to change. So what is being shifted is what is being now, it's not a question of being defensive. Question is, what is it that we use mathematics for? Why do we do mathematics? We do it for its usefulness. And that is an appropriate thing to do. Alright, that the appropriate thing is not to go about giving proofs using certain metaphysical biases, because that does not achieve anything. But the appropriate thing is to apply that mathematics to wherever we are applying, to maybe to any kind of technology or to commercial transactions or to whatever. But that should have, that's a paradigm shift, that your mathematics is not about proof, it's about calculation. If I have made the point clear. So we are not really trying to defend this or defend that or do anything or attack or it's just trying to find out what the truth is, because there's so many lies have been piled on. It's very difficult. It's like, trying to find the bottom from pigeon dung. That's what has happened.
I suppose the gentleman is talking about something more practical. That is, instead of condemning them, saying that they are wrong, why don't we move on? But how to move on?
Can't move on. Because the moment you try to move on, the moment I try to change something, so I say, all right, I want to do mathematics like this. You think this is going to be accepted? Look at all the control structures that are in place. You can't just move on. It's not so easy. Okay, that's the past, forget about it. That's the control structure, forget about it. You can forget about it. They won't forget about it. You won't be allowed to do it. Right? So how are you going to break it? So unless you break it, you have no space to do anything.
Okay. You know, Dr. Sanley, he comes from fine arts, so that's why he's very gentle. literature, fine arts. Yes, please.
Thank you.
I have two questions, one from the gentleman at the back and then one from the gentleman in the front. Yeah. Which one comes first?
Okay.
Kaya comes first, okay.
Thank you, Prof. Raju, for such an interesting, I think, thought-provoking ideas. But for me, it's about definition of the past. How are you going to deal with the past and how are you defining it? But at the same time, a bit confused in the sense of how you define it. What's so important for us to know? Euclid wrote the elements and how you're comparing it, and then at the same time put it the blame on the church. While most of the processes that you're showing at the same time is very much derived from Jean Bion himself, from the church traditions, and incorporating documents.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Even while you're comparing to prove or to disapprove that Euclid wrote the elements is still by using the philologist's approach of Jean Bion, developed by the church itself, by comparing primary sources. So this is, my contention is this. The question is, what is our state and body of knowledge for our indigenous to define our own past? That's really matters here. Looking from the Malay perspective, historically speaking, does it individual really matters in the Malay psychic? It's not. How African history has been redeveloped is not by documents, by songs, folklores, orals, and other means. If we're still looking for the harder evidence, documents, writtens, and others, believe me, I think that we are still in the Western paradigm, looking at the things, because that has been developed and that's how been defined as past, as evidence. That is the challenge. I think that is the challenge. Thank you.
I have no problem with non-textual evidence. I mentioned non-textual evidence, I did not emphasize it. So I did not insist that evidence should have the form of manuscript evidence. So in fact, on the contrary, I talk about non-textual evidence. For example, when we discuss Ptolemy, I look at the issue of the calendar. So you want to talk about Almagest being written by Ptolemy, it does not conform to the non-textual evidence of the calendar. So now calendar is part of practice. It's part of your festivities, it's part of various things that you do. So I do take this sort of thing into account. I am not restricting myself to manuscript sources at all. Okay, so I have no difficulty with that at all. I would agree with you on that.
Prof, I want to take you back to Prof. Saleh's question. Prof. Saleh's question is an important one. Accepted that we have been dominated by Western ideas and theories. How do we reclaim our original position? How do we reclaim our authenticity? And your response was, we can't do it. This is not what I came to hear here. I was hoping you would suggest some ways forward, rather than saying we can't do it. If we can't do it, then this entire 2 hours has been a complete waste.
When did I say that?
You just said we can't do it.
No. I said that you cannot do something in such a naive fashion. After all, you are talking about wasting 2 hours. I have wasted so many years trying to do this. So obviously I think something can be done and
yes,
I'm doing it.
Let's hear that.
So, but to say that in a naive way, forget about all this history, forget about all this philosophy, we can go and do what we want, that is a very naive approach. You cannot just do what you want unless you unwind all those power structures. Okay, unless you break them down, you cannot do what you want because they will not let you do what you want. That was my point. I'm not saying we cannot do anything. So as I particularly said, we are coming out with a new picture of how you should teach math, how you should teach science, how you should teach social science, how you should teach philosophy and so on. So this is what the conference last month did. It came out with an entire new agenda, with an entire new syllabus and so many fields. So those are all the things we would like to do. And all that I said was that we need to strategize it. That yes, we want to do it, and we know there is going to be some resistance, lot of resistance or whatever. So we need a strategy to get around that, and that is what I have been trying to do in mathematics. So we are talking about a completely new way of teaching it, which has been tried out and which is being spread now. Iran is interested and so on. So there are lots of other people who pick that up. It will take time, obviously. It's not going to happen overnight. It will take 5 years, 10 years and so on. So I didn't say we can't do anything. I said this is the way to go about doing it, but you cannot do it in a naive way by saying, okay, let's forget Euclid, let's forget this, let's forget everything, and then let's do it. Then you can't. Okay, you have to take all those factors into account. That was my point. I didn't say we are not doing anything. We cannot do anything. That would be defeatist complete.
Thank you, Prof. Sorry. Thank you for your talk. I have just a small comment on your talk. You showed us how it's possible to change the history normally, and I think it happened in your talk. How and why? Because when Islam spread in the other countries, there were a lot of nations, not just Arab. I have some famous name in mathematics, especially, for example, Al-Khwarizmi algorithm is from his name, or the other, for example, Al-Maghribi from Morocco, and the other countries, they were not Arab,
Okay. Fine.
You wrote Arab Muslim, they were Muslim, all of them, they were Muslim, from different nations.
No, agree. I have no difficulty with that because, there is only so much you can put on the overhead. Okay, so when I would write, I would take into account all these things, but if you're making a presentation, you have to cut out many of the details. I fully agree.
Thank you. Because in the Wikipedia, in the Google, it's like this complete, but it's not complete. Sure. Thank you.
I agree.
Yeah, but I'm not here to defend Professor Raju, but I have read some of his writing. He mentioned the names that you mentioned in his earlier writings. To be fair, yeah. Can I have the next question, please? Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor Raju, for a very enlightening talk. I completely appreciate what you said, that you need to decolonize, history and also philosophy, because for everything, especially in the body of knowledge, it has its history of development and it has its way of thinking. Now, I think that I agree with you that it cannot be done naively, it cannot be done overnight. There are political structures. The political will, we need intellectual will, and we need economic resources. But more than that, I think the West, because they are the most powerful nation and they have dominated us for hundreds of years, have also defined our values. What is true, what is good, and what is beautiful is according to how we think. And for as long as we think the way they think, we cannot break out of it. So even the question of truth, and the question which we are trying to establish in history and in philosophy, if we cannot move away from what they tell us, what is fashionably true, we cannot get away. Or what is good today, which is not based on eternal metaphysical principles, true to our religious, spiritual heritage, we can't get away. And what is beautiful, and I think for as long as we live in this situation of being dominated not only by our knowledge but our values, I don't think we can step out of the box or we can move on. So I think the reclaiming is on many fronts. But the most important front, I think, is the spiritual and the moral, followed by the intellectual. Because even if we have the intellectual will, but we are not guided by the right values, I don't think they're wrong-headed. Demonizing the West completely is not the answer either. And glorifying our own faults, which we must admit, we have our failings, will not help either. And the other thing I just want to add is the humiliation that they cause us. As a Muslim, I look at how Osama bin Laden, not that I completely agree with him because I don't have the full facts about him, but he is a Muslim man who dared to stand up to the West. He is defined as a terrorist. And how they eventually got rid of him, the portrayal is he was a pathetic old man who was watching television for images of himself. For me, that is humiliating the dignity of every Muslim who dare to fight against the West. And what does it do to our psyche to watch such a pathetic figure of someone who dare to stand up to the West? They play very, very strong games against us. And I think if we buy into them, I don't think we can get anywhere. So I think that's just something that I would like to share. Thank you.
Well, if I may respond, I agree with you. If we are, and particularly the question of you have to have some space, create some space to stand up if you are going to be driven by what is fashionable. And you get driven by that if you are asked to say that you must publish in fashionable journals or in high-impact journals, because that's what they would publish most easily. So that becomes a method of forcing you to do whatever is fashionable. And I think that is why particularly I keep talking about this issue of this ISI norm and so on and so forth. It needs to be reconsidered, it needs to be tailored to our own, to make it useful to us instead of making it useful to others. So I agree with you there. And regarding Osama bin Laden, I think that this is precisely what we have been talking about, that this whole idea of this propaganda is to make you feel small. You look at, for example, what was done, I mentioned Bayat al-Hikmah. It was deliberately bombed. Because it was a symbol of cultural pride, it was bombed. These are all the machinations of soft power, that you are proud of something, we are going to degrade it. And then, if I say that you are proud of Euclid, we are going to pull him down, and you accuse me of demonizing the West. So I am not demonizing, as I said very clearly. It's a critical perspective.
Yeah. I was about to say the same thing about demonizing the West.
Okay, thank you. There's a little commercial with regard to what Prof. Raju has said. We are publishing, USM Press is publishing Prof. Raju's book called Maths Made Easy. So you don't have to send that to ISI.
Thank you.
Can I get a free copy?
Sure.
Can I? Because I want to redeem my past. I'm not sure if my soul is still there actually.
So wait for the book. Right? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can have a maximum of 10 more minutes. Yeah. Can we have the next question? Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Asima. I'm a student here at USM. What I would like to ask Professor is that when we talk about the mathematics, probably might be taught us in a wrong way, or maybe wrongly taught, or maybe maybe the basics actually are not true. In this way, the way we look at the world today, capitalism, the way the rise of capitalism, which we are at the peak at the moment maybe, and our minister was saying that if their communism is here, so it seems like that everything will be fabricated by the West according to how they can capitalize on it. So if it is like so, then do you think that if we are going to follow them and accept everything the way it is in economic terms, in every other way of life, don't you think that we are going to make them more strong in future? Thank you.
I agree, that's what I said. The idea was that Euclid is a symbol. So you're looking at this one particular case. So in one particular case, if you expose the falsehood, you would stop believing it in other cases as well. In each case you will ask, what is the evidence? If this could happen with Euclid, why not we examine the evidence in the other cases? And the moment you reach that skeptical position, you will become much freer from all that propaganda, because the propaganda runs on trust. You trust Wikipedia, you trust Google, you trust what they say, you trust Western sources and so on. And that's how Wikipedia defines a reliable source. Those are the sources which can be trusted. Something which comes from here and there cannot be trusted. If you look at what a journalist does, if something new comes out in science, if it comes from Harvard or MIT, he will trust it. If it comes from here, he will distrust it. So it's basically this question of trust. And the idea is that if you look at one such case, and it's just an example case, then there will be many other cases where you will learn that so much of falsehood has been piled up, and therefore you should distrust it. And the moment you do that, you are not following it.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Dato. I probably feel compelled to say some words because we have been having this kind of a discourse, starting with Professor Said Naqib Alatas twice, and now Professor Raju, and I guess we will be having a lot more of this kind of discourse. And discourse perhaps is rather unusual from many of the discourses that you attend, where we actually just take home some messages and then perhaps forget about it. It is a kind of a discourse that I would hope that we can redefine in university. By redefining a university means basically the same thing that's been said, trying to look for what is the truth. Of course, the truth varies from people to people, but there is a certain element of trying to search, and you are not happy with what you're given, you still want to find out what it is all about and going to the nitty-gritty of it. So this is a science university, and science are very prone to accepting things at face value because it is said by somebody else and so on and so forth. I think we've gone through that. And I think we want to change that. And by changing that is to look at different ways of thinking, a different way of understanding knowledge as it were. And this is where again the university wants to bring in the social sciences and humanities. And we keep on saying this. Because until and unless we marry the sciences and the social sciences and humanities together, we will not get a total perspective knowledge. And therefore we will go out almost a half-baked graduate scholar, whatever you want to call yourself. So I hope you understand this. It's not about dehumanizing people or demonizing people, or because a number of times churches have been mentioned, not about degrading the churches, things like that, but trying to understand the perspective of where we come, because Malaysians are very good in making things very simplistic, and suddenly we become, at the end of the day, we are quarreling among ourselves.